Hi guys, welcome back to another tutorial. So in my last two videos I showed you how to cut this pant using pattern. Then I got some requests from people telling me to show you guys how to do it without pattern. So basically how to cut out or draft out these pants, this palazzo pants directly on your fabric without having to use patterns. So I would like to call it the freehand method. If it's something you're interested in, keep watching this video. So we are going to start with drafting the front parts of the pants, and if you want to know how much to fold your fabric without having to waste it, what you just do is your hip divided by 4, you put that aside, and then you add your hip divided by 16, whatever you get, you add it to your hip divided by 4. And then remember that this pants is supposed to have allowance, so you are going to have 1 inch allowance on the left part, 1 inch allowance on the right part, and then also remember that you need half an inch allowance for ease allowance at your hip area. So in essence, you are going to, when you are folding your fabric, you are going to add whatever you get when you divide your hip by 4 plus whatever you get when you divide your hip by 16 for your crouch extension, and then 2.5 inches for ease and sewing allowance. I hope you understand. So that is what you measure when you want to fold, so that you don't waste any fabric at all. Then if you are a size 8 and below, you will need 2 yards to draft out this particular pant, and if you are a size 10 and above, you will need 2.5 yards or more for a palazzo pant. So the first thing we're going to do is take out our 1.5 inch allowance that we added to this pattern from the edge of our fabric. From that allowance we have taken out, we are going to calculate our hip divided by 4 measurement. So whatever your hip divided by 4 measurement is, you are going to mark it from that line and rule a straight line. Now next thing we want to do is take our hip line and our crotch line and the rest of it. So what we want to do, I'm not using the upper part of this fabric, so I'm just cutting it off. Then this trouser is going to have a band, of course, so I am using 1.5 inches band for this. So what I'm doing is that from the upper part I took my tape up so that it can serve as my band, because I have to subtract my band now since I'm working directly on a fabric. So instead of calculating 9 inches, which is my hip length, I added half an inch because we are going to sew out half an inch from the top of this material. So 9.5 inches is what I'm using as our hip length. Then for my crotch length, I just did my hip divided by 4 plus 2 inches because this is going to be a high waist palazzo pant. I'm just going to rule out the hip length first. After doing that, the next thing I now did was, after getting my crotch length measurement, which is hip divided by 4 plus 2 inches for a high waist pant, I am marking my crotch length measurement now and adding half an inch. It's supposed to be 12 inches, but because I'm going to sew half an inch off the top of this material, I am adding half an inch to the crotch length, which is now 12.5 inches. So these measurements are very important. Don't make this mistake, so that your crotch area will not be too tight or too loose. You just need to make sure your measurements are correct. Now for my crotch extension, you already have the measurement for your crotch extension, which is your hip divided by 16, but you can also use the method I used in my previous video, which is whatever you have in this your hip measurement, now you're going to divide it by 4, which is the same calculation, and then add it as your crotch extension. Then from that your crotch area, that depth area, you want to come up by 1 inch and then connect that point to your hip area to form the crotch curve area. Then at your crotch line, as at the center front, you want to come in by half an inch and connect it down to your crotch area, because you want that place to relax on your body well. Just exactly the same thing we did when we're drafting our pattern. This is the exact same method, but we are just doing it directly on our fabric. Now the next thing you want to do is that from your center front, you want to measure your waist divided by 4 and put that measurement in. Then add your 1 inch allowance for sewing. On your hip line, that's already your hip measurement, you want to add 1 inch for sewing and then half inch for ease, just like we did in our previous video. Then you are going to connect the hip point to the waist point. So we have our waist point and our hip point settled. Now what you want to do now is that on that top part of the waist, at the center front, come down by half an inch and connect it, because you want the front part of your pattern to be deeper than the back part of your pattern. Now the next thing we're going to do is measure our knee length to mark at our knee line. Then after that, what you want to do next is draw out your grain line, and the grain line is just the middle part of the crouch down to the full length of this pant. So just like I'm doing, you take the middle part, and then you're going to come to the knee line. I'm removing the 1.5 inch at the edge there, and then rolling it straight. And I'm also going to remove the 1 inch at this other side, just to make sure I'm getting the same measurement. Then I'm going to take the middle point at the knee line. After that, I'm going to rule a straight line to form our grain line for the knee area. Now remember that in our last pattern we reduced our knee area as well as the lower part of the trouser because we didn't want it to be very bogus. So I'm just taking 1/2 inch on both sides of the knee line, and then I'm adding 1 inch back for our sewing allowance. I just hope you understand. I'm coming in by 1/2 inch on both sides to make your knee line smaller. Then I'm adding our sewing allowance of 1 inch. When you are done with that, you're just going to connect the lines to your crotch area. Next thing we're going to do now is take the full length of this pant, and I always say make sure your full length, make sure you are generous with the length of your palazzo pant. That's where the beauty comes in. And then I'm adding 1.5 inch hem allowance after taking the full length. Then what I'm going to do is that I'm removing the 1 inch from this side and the 1.5 inch from the other side allowance, so that I can get the exact same thing I have on my knee line on the hemline also. So after that, I'm going to mark the midpoint so that I can extend our gray line to the end of the trouser, to the end of the pants. That's to where our hem is going to be. Then what I'm doing is that I'm removing 1 inch on both sides because I want it to be smaller than our knee area. Then I'm adding back 1 inch for sewing allowance. So it's like I did not just remove. The reason why I'm adding it back is because we are going to use this 1 inch to sew when we are stitching these pants together. I just hope I'm not confusing you. It is not complicated and it is very easy. If you have any questions, you can drop in the comment section. So after joining to the knee area, you already have your front pattern set. I'm just going to add 1/2 inch at that crotch area because that's the only place now that does not have any allowance. So you're going to add 1/2 inch to that crotch area, and then you go ahead to cut out your front pattern or the front part of your pants. So like I said before, this is basically the same thing with what we did in the previous video, but there are just a little bit of changes because we are doing it directly on our pattern, and this is for those people that asked for the direct application, that is the freehand method, because I know most of us love freehand method. You can practice this and it's going to be faster for you with time. Now going ahead to cut out the back, we're going to place the front pattern now on a fresh fabric unfold, and at your crotch area extend that part by 1.5 inch out. So remember that we already put our sewing allowance at the front pattern. It is going to reflect at the back pattern. What you want to do next now is that from the center front, you are now going to come in at the center back by 1.5 inch, and then you come up by 1 inch or 1.5 inches, depends on the size of your butt. This is just going to help that back part of your pants. When you sit, it's going to help it relax. So what you want to do now is that from that part you've come up by, you want to measure your original waist divided by 4, your waist measurement on your front pattern. Just place it on your back pattern. So measure from that place you came up by, then you measure your waist divided by 4 there and connect those 2 points together. After that, what you want to do next is on your hip area, you want to come out by 1/2 inch because we don't want the hip part to be too free, just a little bit free. We're going to come out by 1/2 inch at the back area. Then you're going to connect it to the waist area and connect it to your knee line. You're going to do the same for your crotch area. You're going to connect it to your knee line. And then for your back crotch, when you have removed the front part, you want to connect that crotch area to your waist area. And then remember that there's 1/2 inch allowance, sewing allowance at the crotch area for the front. You can extend it later when you have put your zipper allowance. For your zipper allowance, just measure 10 inches from the upper part of the back area and then come out by 1 inch for your zipper allowance. After doing that, you want to connect the lines together and then connect your allowance for the other part of the crotch area and go ahead and cut. This is exactly what we did on our papers. We are just doing it on our fabrics for those people that don't like drafting patterns. The only difference between drafting on your fabric and drafting on your pattern is that you need to be extremely careful, because whatever mistake you make on your fabric cannot be undone at all, compared to when you draft out on patterns on paper. You can always adjust and maybe take care of your mistakes before you draft it out on your fabric. So when you are cutting, make sure you are very careful when you are cutting out so that you will not make any mistakes whatsoever. So now that we are done with the front and the back, next thing we are going to do is our pocket for the front. And for the pocket, you want to measure 7.5 inches from the upper part, because you need, you're going to sew in half inch at the upper part with the band. So you're going to add that half inch. So it would have been 7 inches normally, but 7.5 inches. Then you're going to come in from the edge by 1 inch and connect that line. Then you're going to cut it out. But when you're cutting it out, make sure you leave up to half an inch that you'll be able to use to join the pocket, since you are drafting directly on the fabric. Now for the pocket, normally we would have done 12 by 7 inches pocket, but I am marking 13 inches because we need half inch to join the pocket up, and would also need half inch to close the pocket down. Make sure you're cutting the two pockets together. Just fold and fold again and cut it out. So your pocket is going to be 12 inches plus 1 inch allowance by 7 inches plus 1 inch allowance. Next thing you want to do now is your belt, or your band. For your band, you're just going to fold your fabric and then measure your waist now divided by 2. You're going to measure it here and add 1 inch that will join with the zipper allowance at the back. And then for the width, for this particular pant, it is 1.5 inches width. That's the band is going to be 1.5 inches wide. What I'm doing is that I'm folding it on 2 inches and adding extra half inch that we're going to use to fold it in. Remember how we sewed it in our previous video? That's how we're going to be doing for this. And then fixing the pocket, or placing the pocket placement is just basically the same with the previous video. So I just did this video to show you guys how to draft out your pants pattern directly on your fabric without having to go through using paper. The stitching method is practically the same with our previous video. I just did this one for people that requested on how to draft your palazzo pants on your fabric, directly on your fabric, without having to use paper. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up, share this video to others, and hit that subscribe button. If you want to know how to sew, maybe this is your first video you're seeing on my page and you want to know how to sew this, you can refer to my previous video, on the last video on this page just before this one, on how to sew a palazzo pant. The method is the same. Don't forget to drop your questions if you have any.